A long time back, the main instance of a worldwide plant infection was recorded, and it began to desolate the greater part of our environments. Eating food tainted with the infection causes serious immune system illnesses, and the deficiency of vegetation has diminished how much oxygen in the environment to 10%, which has expanded the quantity of catastrophic events from one side of the planet to the other. The world's driving exploration labs have been fruitless in fostering a fix, and individuals are beginning to think the planet is ill-fated. The main expectation left is venture Gemini, created by specialist Stephen around two old outsider antiquities found by scientists, who are certain the items are 4 billion years of age, before there was any sort of life on the planet. Stephen's group has reproduced the super extreme materials that the circle and the motor are made of, and have made duplicates, and this motor has permitted them to construct a boat that flew automated and track down a reasonable planet to terraform. The circle is for making life and works, thanks to many orders that the group has at last wrapped up disentangling. It's likewise verification that life on Earth was made by outsiders. A group comprising of the two specialists and military pilots will make a trip to Make Earth 2.0 with the circle in the nearby planet group Tess, which is a few hundred light years from here. Stephen has a spouse called Amy, who doesn't believe that he should go on this mission. Upon the arrival of the send-off, she actually comes to the base to attempt to prevent Stephen from leaving, yet she doesn't make it on time and should see how the boat departs the planet. At the point when the vessel leaves the environment, a strange break shows up on the outsider circle, demonstrating they may not be distant from everyone else. Utilizing the outsider motor innovation, the boat opens a twisting gateway that permits them to bounce across the universe. Anyway, when they come to the opposite side, the frameworks demonstrate a mistake. They haven't shown up at Tess, they're someplace obscure. Stephen faults engineer Peter for this, guaranteeing he committed an error when he entered the directions, so he's feeling better of his obligations until further notice. Minutes after the fact, while Stephen rests, he continues to contemplate Amy, yet additionally about whenever he first actuated the circle, which permitted him to see some abnormal humanoid structure that immediately vanished. Subsequently, Stephen requests that the group attempt to set the leap direction to sort out where they are, yet it's difficult to do in light of the fact that every one of their information is screwed up, as though they moved between the third and fourth aspects. In the interim, Peter leaves his shelter and takes one of the surveillance cameras so he can assess the circle alone. At that point, the PC reports somebody has opened the maintenance isolated space and that there's an unidentified article drawing nearer. To everybody's shock, they unexpectedly see a frozen Peter drifting outside. Specialist David thinks Peter finished things since he was unable to live with his slip-up, however Specialist Alyona will not accept it, since she's known Peter for quite some time, and he wasn't that sort of fellow. Stephen chastens her for crying over the person that has bound mankind and orders her to assume control over Peter's obligations from this point forward. Afterward, David shares that when his little girl kicked the bucket, he additionally nearly finished things, yet he figured he could be valuable all things considered. Now that the mission is over, he's inclination futile once more, yet Stephen guarantees him they'll track down an answer. At that point, the boat goes over a planet made of volcanic stone. It doesn't have oxygen. However, the external climate isn't forceful. Significance, they just need breathing covers. Stephen believes it's the ideal choice to carry on their arrangement and is anxious to land, yet Skipper Ryan stops him, bringing up they didn't do a legitimate assessment of the planet yet, so Stephen is carelessly gambling with the well-being of the team. Stephen couldn't care less, however, and reminds everybody he's the one giving orders here. The group will go down on a bus while official Richard stays on the mothership. When the van draws nearer to the planet, they experience an exceptionally forceful tempest, so they need to enact the slowing down engines to slow their fall. It'll likewise go through the entirety of their fuel and keep them from returning. However, it's their main opportunity to get by. As the van raises a ruckus around town, the team drops and Stephen dreams of the time he gifted Amy an armband made with a specific piece of the old circle, attempting to interface the two most significant things to him. Minutes after the fact, the team awakens and quickly returns to work. The van hasn't gotten basic harm. However, the fuel is low and they're stuck here. Stephen doesn't see the issue with this, since they came to remain for a considerable length of time, and regardless of whether they land on the spot they needed, he's certain they can involve one of the gigantic caverns as a vault for the circle to be sent off in. In the meantime, in the secret hallways of the van, an odd goo drops off the walls. In the mothership, Richard does a review of different rooms and tracks down this goo too, along with the missing camera. When everybody is appropriately prepared, the group takes the circle to the closest cavern and enacts it effectively. Then they return to the van to start gathering information. Yet Ryan intrudes on their work to declare military regulation as active in the station. To make sense of his choice, he shares a few records Richard sent him while the specialists were working. It's a video of Peter recording himself while he investigates the circle, so he can't be blamed for botches later. At the point when he makes the way for the motor, he finds something moving in the shadows that unexpectedly hops on him and kills him prior to tossing him out of the boat. The camera can't catch the state of this animal, yet Richard makes sense of he's checked all the recording and that outsider has been with them since they left Earth, since it went inside the circle like the diversion. It presumably caused the disappointment during the leap, however it's not on the mothership any longer. It's gone down to the planet with the van. Richard can follow it in light of the fact that the outsider causes obstruction in the electromagnetic field, making sense of the terrible recording. The conversation's unexpectedly hindered by David, who is seeing something bizarre on the framework. The circle is running an unexpected program in comparison to the one they transferred. Steven needs to return to the circle, yet Ryan stops him, advising him that he will not permit him to let any longer, and blaming him for staying quiet. Ryan uncovers Richard's likewise found film of Steven, seeing that unusual shape back on Earth months prior. So he realized there was potential for a danger, but he told no one, meaning Peter's demise is his shortcoming. Annoyed by this allegation, Steven surges out of the room while contemplating practically everything he and David put into this venture. Steven hadn't been certain David ought to have been accompanied them since he was all the while lamenting. Yet David persuaded him he was fine and needed to make a superior Earth to keep different children from kicking the bucket like his little girl did. Minutes after the fact, Steven meets with David and requests that he escape with him through the isolated space to mind the circle. David would rather not defy Ryan. However, Steven adjusts his perspective by helping him to remember his little girl and the eventual fate of the planet. When they come to the cavern, they notice the circle is making an outsider life structure quicker than it made life on Earth, since somebody rearranged the settings. Steven quickly starts chipping away at the circle settings, disregarding David's supplications to leave and talk about things with everybody. At that point, David sees on their radar that the outsider is drawing nearer, so he discharges an admonition shot to attempt to make Steven move. Steven answers by taking out his own weapon. Yet before things can get appalling, they notice the outsiders as of now entering the cavern. After Steven snatches a piece of the circle to take with him, the two men start taking off, seeing the animals drawing nearer a result of its shadows and the clamors it makes. They at long last get a full perspective on it when they leave the cavern. However, before the animal can go after them, they figure out how to get once again into the bus and close the isolated space. David calls Steven out for putting their lives in danger. However, Steven reminds him the circle is more significant, and in the future, he will not hold back to shoot. Then Ryan makes an appearance to reprimand Steven also, and when Steven clears up they'll have to use power to stop him. Ryan punches him. Unexpectedly, the PC raises a caution to tell the team the module's trustworthiness has been compromised. Alyona passes on her space to check the issue and tracks down loads of goo in the passage, just to be maneuvered once more into an alternate region out of nowhere. It's Blunt who illuminates her the outsider has made an opening in the low deck and presently is in the lander. Cautiously, the pair advances toward conceal in the lab, where it's getting extremely difficult to relax. Instantly, the lights go out, and a weird commotion can be heard digging out from a deficit the plant units. This implies the outsider is here, so Blunt pushes Alyona out of the room, and as she runs down the hallway, she can hear Forthright's shouts, while the outsider kills him. Alyona meets with the remainder of the group in the control room and lets them know what occurred, provoking Ryan to shout at Steven for carrying the outsider back with him. The animal entered by making an opening in the body. It likewise has harmed the generator, and the cameras aren't working, so they've lost contact with Richard, and they don't have a clear line of sight on the remainder of the boat. Their main arrangement is to go to the reinforcement generator and reconnect everything, which is very challenging to pull off in the event that they can't follow the animal, provoking Steven to elect to go, since it's his shortcoming. With his weapon out, Steven cautiously advances toward the generator and figures out how to bring back the correspondence framework. The group can follow the outsider now and caution Steven that it's close to him. However, when Steven attempts to leave, he starts hearing those clamors. Fortunately, Ryan thinks quick and hauls him back into the control room by utilizing a metal rope. Then, the group makes an arrangement together to clear the outsider out of the boat. While Steven holds up outside to play lure, Alyona opens the isolated spaces followed by the lab entryway, racing to conceal in one more space. As the outsider emerges, the animal rapidly starts clearing its path through the airtight chambers. However, when Richard attempts to turn on the motor to wear it out, he can't on the grounds that the outsider is slowing down the sign. Steven quickly gets as far away as possible, and Alyona comes to help him. Yet at that point, the outsider emerges, and Richard recaptures admittance to the motor. Steven and Alyona run back inside as the animal is hit by the fire. Yet this isn't sufficient to kill it, and it attempts to arrive at Steven, who is being hauled inside by David. The outsider's appendage harms David's arm right as they close the entryway, leaving the animal's appendage inside. While the monster gets back to the cavern, Ryan closes the sealed areas, and the others get to reseal the opening. Minutes after the fact, the group tracks down Plane's body, and keeping in mind that Alyona chooses to end things for herself on account of her misery, Steven reconsiders Amy. She had done whatever it takes not to leave by making sense of she was dealing with an immunization. Yet more significantly, she was pregnant. Yet this was sufficiently still to make Steven stay. since saving Earth was a higher priority than his own life. David goes to the lab to get his injury gauzed, and Stephen carries the limb to concentrate on it. He finds the animal is a biorobot produced using a similar material as the circle, and that implies the circle's objective has forever been to make these monsters. Stephen illuminates David that the limb has tainted him with a microorganisms with an extremely strong guard instrument, meaning his blood currently holds the way to making an immunization to save Earth. When Stephen makes a cut on the arm, the lights go off the deep end, and he recalls the picture he saw back on the planet, meaning the outsider is a transponder, and this is the manner in which his race colonizes planets. Stephen concludes they need to kill the outsider and re-establish the circle's settings. However, Ryan secures him in the lab and lets him know he's set to be taken to jail for endangering everybody's life. Ryan calls attention to lives are extra to Stephen, and David concurs, saying Stephen just needs to play legend, and he never thought often about humankind. This causes Stephen to recollect her last contention with Amy, who blamed him for having a deliverer complex prior to discarding her wristband. Stephen keeps on doing all necessary investigation in the lab and gets a hypothesis that Richard affirms when he checks the movement logs. They didn't go through space, they went through time. They're still on Earth, however, 4 billion years in the past before life existed, and the clone circle they brought is similar one the scientists see as later on. Overlooking the reality David's injury is deteriorating, Stephen gets energized when he understands the circle section he got before is a similar one he involves in the future to make Amy's armband, so he continues to compose a message on it to show Amy how to enact the circle they abandoned. In the meantime, in the present, Amy appears at Stephen's lab while attempting to manage the news, saying the group bombed their central goal. Abruptly, Richard carries troubling news to Stephen. Ryan is getting ready explosives to explode the circle and has switched off his radio to stay away from objections. Stephen asks Richard to reopen the isolated space so he can get out, and when he finds Ryan with the bombs, he starts making sense of they can make a preferable arrangement over this. Their discussions interfered with by a shot that kills Ryan unexpectedly. It's David, who's gotten away from through the isolated space and has gone insane due to the disease, making him think the outsider has picked him to help it makes things right, since people are a breakdown from the circle. Stephen tosses Alyona's Rubik's solid shape at the wall to occupy David and grounds a shot on him, provoking David to take off injured. A short time later, Stephen enacts the bomb prior to going outside to shoot a flare to certainly stand out. Stephen makes it pursue him to the control room and secures it there. However, as he runs down the passageway, David starts shooting at him and drives him into stowing away. At that point, the outsider separates the entryway and approaches Stephen, who figures out how to get it off him with a fast shot. The outsider pursues Stephen as he takes off, and when he successfully returns to the control room, he chances upon David, who attempts to kill him. His activities are come by the outsider appearance up and killing him first, allowing Stephen the opportunity to run out of the van just before the bomb at long last detonates and kills the monster. Stephen drops outside for a couple of moments and is awakened by Richard attempting to contact anybody alive. Richard needs to come to save him, yet the Tempest is areas of strength for excessively. Stephen advises him to remain back while he gets back to the cavern to utilize the circle. In the meantime, in the present, Amy finds her wristband once more. Leslie sees the message, so she utilizes it to actuate the circle also. At that point, a couple meet again in a combination of over a wide span of time, and Stephen hustles to share the equation for the immunization prior to communicating his affection right as the association closes. Stephen bites the dust in the cavern due to the absence of oxygen, and Amy cries when she figures out she's a widow now. Numerous months after the fact, Amy is raising an extremely solid child because of the immunization that is presently assisting the Earth with improving as a spot.